Hi there, welcome to Essential Contact for the 9th of June 2020. Well, we're continuing to reflect upon the death of George Floyd and the ensuing rioting. And we're doing that reflecting in the light of what we've been reading in Ephesians on Sunday mornings. And the master plan that we read about in Ephesians, God's plan to unite divided cultures in Christ Jesus. And a verse for us today on this topic is Philemon and verses 15 and 16. Paul wrote to Philemon, "You might have him back for good," he says, "no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother." Let me explain that. Well, the New Testament world was, of course, had as its backdrop the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire was an empire which involved slavery, slaves and masters. Some of these relationships may have been healthy in some ways, for example, more like bosses and employees or even familial relationships, but no doubt some were the worst kind of slavery. How does Jesus' apostle Paul address this in the Roman Empire? Well, he addresses it with the gospel, the great announcement of Jesus. He knows that the gospel of Jesus, believed and lived out, it destroys the evils of slavery from within. Philemon was a man and he lived in Colossae in the first century, and he owned a slave named Onesimus. And Philemon then heard the gospel from Paul. But then this slave, Onesimus, he wronged Philemon and ran away. But while Onesimus was away, he himself bumped into Paul. Perhaps he deliberately went to seek out Paul. He believed the gospel of Jesus for himself. And then Paul sends Onesimus back to Philemon with his letter. Dun, dun, dun. So here we have a slave who'd wronged his master and a slave owner, each of them coming together, but each of them having found salvation in Jesus and learned that whoever comes to Jesus is equal. They are a forgiven child of our Creator. So what's going to happen when these two come back together, the slave owner and the slave who'd wronged his slave owner? But both have come to meet Jesus. What's going to happen? I'll just reread that again. Philemon, verses 15 and 16. Paul says to Philemon, you're getting him back no longer as a slave, but as a brother, as a dear brother. You see, where there is oppression in our society, the gospel tells us that we are all made in the image of God, and he died for each one of us that we might be saved. We are equal, and oppression must stop. It was, of course, the gospel that motivated William Wilberforce. And where, perhaps on the other hand, there is hurt and resentment in our society, the gospel tells us that although each of us has hurt God, he loves us. He loved us and he died for us to forgive us. And so we must forgive in the same way. It was, of course, the gospel that motivated Corrie ten Boom to forgive her captors and to start again. The gospel of Jesus is the antidote to the evils in our society. It comes in under the radar and it undermines oppression and hatred and resentment. The gospel of Jesus is the antidote, so let us live it out. Let us apply it where there is oppression or there's hurting, and let's pass it on.